All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the Humboldt Park Chicago Avenue Visioning Session number 2. My name is Ernest Bellamy. I am the project manager for this project with the Department of Planning and Development. I'm a city planner within the West region for DPD. Thank you all so much for being willing participants to join this evening virtually in helping to further craft this vision for the RFP for Humboldt Park, Chicago Avenue. Our agenda of this evening, after a quick welcome, is kind of going into a recap of Invest Southwest for newcomers, followed by a recap of the first visioning session, and then diving into what we've done since then, since our first visioning session, into the opportunity site selection, and then breakout groups for further discussion, and then a full group discussion after our breakout room discussions, and a little bit about next steps for the RFP process. So again, welcome. Thank you again for coming. We really appreciate that you all have made it out on a Thursday evening. Thank you to our valued community partners who have regularly attended roundtables and the first visiting session up till this point. Some names are on the screen. We want to give thanks to Alderman Mitz and Alderman Burnett for their involvement in the process as well as the Chicago Central Area Committee, who has allowed us to be supercharged at DPD with the pro bono services of the RFP consultant team led by JGMA with Belgravia, Integra Realty Resources, and Q Construction. If I can ask everyone just to keep yourself on mute, we will have an opportunity for feedback at selected points in the presentation. Thank you. So this evening's workshop goals are to better understand the residential and commercial markets of West Humboldt Park. Also determine parcel-specific development priorities for Chicago Avenue, and where we can create new amenities to benefit the West Humboldt Park community, as well as confirm the preferred development building, massing, and programming needs that we'll see this evening. Lastly, identify the desired urban design principles for new development along Chicago Avenue. And so without further ado, I'll give a recap of Invest Southwest for those who are new with us this evening. Invest Southwest is a $750 million initiative using public funds over the next 3 years to seek and leverage funding for a new investment. This is focused on 12 commercial corridors and 10 communities within the south and west sides, as you see here on the screen. Invest Southwest supports infrastructure development, improved programming for residents and businesses, as well as policies that impact each of the community areas surrounding these corridors to create lasting impact. So it's not just about the corridors, it's about the communities as well. So some of you may be asking, what are these RFPs? RFPs are requests for proposals. Traditionally, RFPs provide basic details regarding the subject property and a brief indication of the preferred use. Our Invest Southwest RFPs go a step further and really illustrate the desired urbanism of the site, as well as a more robust description of uses desired by the community. These RFPs are built on available incentives and partner the incentives with the proposed development to ensure a high level of financial feasibility. One thing the RFPs are not are set in stone, 100% fully baked, finished plans. They don't represent at all a set plan for the site in question, but they do help to shape the responses that DPD will receive from developers. Our roundtables that we normally have every month, as well as these visioning workshops, are aimed at reviewing the potentials of what can happen here. And the respondent developers will propose their own designs and programs. Overall, there's three main goals to the Invest Southwest RFPs. First, to facilitate design excellence on the south and west sides. Second, use inclusive decision-making process to include to guide economic development. And lastly, to build local wealth. Now, our release schedule for our RFPs, we're kind of in this third batch here, which is kind of at the tail end of our first initial rollout. We're working towards a April 2021 release of the RFP for not only Humboldt Park on Chicago Avenue, but also North Avenue, the South Shore community, and Greater Roseland. And currently, we're here on the timeline of the schedule of how we've been progressing towards our April 21st release. So some recent news on Invest Southwest, as some of you may have heard in the press, that first batch has been awarded back on the 8th of the month. The proposals for Austin, Auburn, Gresham, and Inglewood were announced. The winners were announced for those. These projects were selected out of 12 different responses from various RFPs that were received. The responses that were received and issued in the fall of 2020. More information on the winners can be found at chicago.gov/Invest Southwest. So delving into a quick recap on the first visioning workshop. As most of you know on the call, prior and for newcomers, the Chicago Avenue West Humboldt Park corridor is a mile-long corridor that spans between North Pulaski Road and Kedzie Avenue. This corridor is one of two within Humboldt Park, but this is the one that we're focusing on tonight. This corridor is just west of the Austin Chicago Avenue corridor, but also sits just west of the currently in construction Joint Public Safety Training Center campus site. We see Chicago Avenue here as an opportunity to kind of add value to the entire Chicago Avenue corridor between Austin and Humboldt Park, as this is kind of pearls on a necklace that approach that we're seeing to the entire corridor of different interventions we can stand up and support. So it's not just a specific one RFP site or one corridor opportunity. We're looking at the entire corridor overall beyond just our deep dive into Chicago Avenue as continued investment. Some previous development priorities along Chicago Avenue that we noted within the first visioning session were that there was an interest in health and wellness, supporting businesses, interest in having quality foods along the corridor, as well as supporting youth and cultural amenities along the corridor. Secondarily, related stakeholder feedback kind of ran equal to what we saw in previous planning studies, which is select stakeholders were interested in how can we attract private investment within the corridor, as well as investing in existing assets along the corridor. How can we improve the parks and vacant lots that are along Chicago Avenue, but as well preserve the existing building stock? How can we rehab and renovate it, but also help support local businesses that are currently there? And lastly, public safety concerns along the corridor, making sure that it's safe for residents and youth to kind of walk up and down to see the various shops or go in between schools and other amenities along the corridor, like, for instance, the YMCA. So along our corridor here, you can kind of see some of the various different amenities that are along the corridor that the team looked at, as well as the opportunity sites that we looked at in the first visioning session. We looked at 4 different sites from 801 North Pulaski, the 3831 through 3853 West Chicago Avenue on the south side of Chicago Avenue. At the heart of the corridor, we looked at a smaller property at 3625 West Chicago Avenue. And lastly, towards the eastern end, 3342 to 3344 West Chicago Avenue, of how an intervention can happen there. As a quick deep dive, or a quick dive into each, we looked these different proposals that we looked at involved looking at different sizes and shapes of potential RFP, as well as what opportunities may be best fit for the different portions of the corridor. And we presented 2 different options for each site that allowed us to look at what can happen on the site as we acquired feedback from the community that was present. So some of the visioning session takeaways from there was that the center of the corridor had a lot of synergy that can be improved on. That really resonated with a lot of people of how well the center of the corridor was functioning. Again, safer streets was resonated out of the first visioning session. Existing business owners were looking for opportunities to redevelop their properties, which is great. There's a great level and amount of business owners that have been regularly attending the roundtables, but also came to the visioning session that were really eager about how can they help be part of the process, how can they redevelop their properties and be prepared for all the changes that can be done along the corridor. Moreover, there was an interest in fresh foods and the grocery store happening further west along the corridor. There is the Aldi at the shopping center towards the east end of the corridor, but residents wanted to see something further west as portions of the corridor started to get into the food desert type of designation, making it hard for people to access fresh foods or a grocery within an easy commute to them. And lastly, banking services along the corridor was another interest of the community. So I'll pause here to open up for any initial questions on the previous recap. If anyone had any questions on what's been presented thus far. Okay, we're a silent audience tonight. That's all right. We'll have the opportunity to really delve into dialogue later on with what we're about to get into in the second visioning session. So I'll kind of pull out to allow for the JGMA team to take over the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Ernest. Okay, thank you, everyone. Good evening to you all. My name is John Rausch, and I am a design principal with JGMA. We are the architects. Happy to be working with you all to envision what can happen here along the Chicago Avenue corridor. So just to dive a little bit farther into what Ernest recapped here, our process really started with an analysis of understanding the area and all the implications that different assets might have. So, in this slide, we're looking at, as Ernest said, the Chicago Avenue corridor from Pulaski to Kedzie, understanding the proximity of the Joint Public Safety Training Campus and what relationship those can have as neighbors. And then, understanding Central Park Avenue is the center of our site, and the proximity and direct access that has down to Garfield Park. Certainly the green line is there, although not really a walkable distance, but we know there's, great bus service along Chicago Avenue leading all the way from Austin to Michigan Avenue. Similarly, there's access to Humboldt Park, very close. And then certainly there is this perceived barrier that's created by the metro lines and the industrial swath towards the east end of the corridor. So all those things start to impact, how we look at the site and the corridor as a whole, and certainly which site tends to make the most sense. In this second visioning time, we have dove a little bit farther into understanding neighborhood demographics and market demographics, so that we can really have sort of an understanding of how the financial part will work. But so we did some research, and we understand there is 56,000 people living in Humboldt Park out of the 2.7 million residents of Chicago. Interestingly, it's really a split in terms of race and ethnicity between the Black community and Hispanic. So right about down the middle. And then the median age in Humboldt Park is 31, which is a little bit younger than the median age in Chicago as a whole. When we look at that, those are just numbers, but when you see on a map, how, we know Chicago's a segregated city, and so looking at the corridor here, we know it's largely Black community, and interestingly, Grand really serves, and the Metro line really serves as this barrier almost between the Hispanic community to the north, which is in blue, and the Black community in red to the south, and then the white community to the east. And then we start to understand a bit about the income. Median household income in Humboldt Park is $38,000 roughly, compared to in Chicago as a whole is $55,000, and East Humboldt Park, which is our direct neighbor to the east, is quite a bit higher at $61,000. And you can also see that information relating directly to median rents in the neighborhoods, which you can see are proportional to those numbers. Interestingly, there is a low percentage of owner-occupied residents in Humboldt Park, so we know that there is a high rentership here. And then also looking at the building stock, when we look at the numbers here, built before 1940 is 70% of the buildings in Humboldt Park, compared to only 45% in Chicago. So that's significant as well when we start to understand what types of buildings we're thinking about, and the ideas of reuse or integrating into the community. And then similarly, we can see how income is highly related to the other demographics. And so, we can see where that sort of wealth shapes out on the map here. And then, certainly we know that in underserved communities, lower income communities, there is maybe less access to healthy food or less access to healthcare or fitness. And so, the research has shown that there is increased levels of asthma and obesity and diabetes in the Humboldt Park community. And so we start to think about what that can mean as well. So we took a step and tried to identify those items that were in fact in the area. So you can see, one of the main places to get some healthy food and produce are at the Aldi and the Market Fresh Foods, which is on, the far east side of the corridor. In terms of health facilities, there are certainly some around, and Amita Health is on the corridor there, but not a ton to the central area of the corridor. And then in the fitness, again, there's some around. YMCA certainly has some programs. But generally, we can see there is sort of a lack there. And then zooming in, so Ernest shared all of the background on sites A, B, and D, and after our last session and touring the site, we have really narrowed into site C here. And the reasons for that, one, it's central to the corridor, and you could see from the last diagram, there's a lot of stakeholders in place around it, from the West Humboldt Park Community Development Council and Rural Clark School, certainly neighborhood housing services. Actually, it's worth mentioning that the site originally we were looking at was what you're seeing here is the privately owned area, and neighborhood housing services has been engaged in the conversation. And so the idea is that they can re-envision what their space needs are. And so they are becoming part of the project. And so because of that, we are able to gain a significant site area for the development. And then generally from comments last time, it was the preferred site by the community. And so we've really dove in to analyze this site C. So you can see here what's outlined. We're standing on Central Park Ave looking west. This is the site. This is the site looking east on Monticello. So there's an existing building. We don't know the exact date, but it's got some interesting terracotta features and some brickwork. And then looking at an aerial view of the overall site, we can see kind of what potential we have there. So we have been working on 3 different scenarios, and I specifically call them scenarios because they're not options. It's not choose one or the other, as Ernest was alluding to before. It's really sort of a we can almost pick and choose menu items, and there's multiple ways. Obviously, these things can come together, but in terms of this diagram we're looking at, I think the best way to think of it is these aren't buildings at all. These are clay blocks that we will need to mold to fit the site. So in each scenario, we have housing, affordable housing most likely, all of the same exact size. That'll be roughly 50 units on each scenario. And then if we look at the retail commercial component here in orange, site 1 has scenario 1 has a slightly smaller retail in this case, and then scenarios 2 and 3 increase that a bit. Scenarios 1 and 3 have the same space allocated for neighborhood housing. And then scenario 2 really envisions what if that space grew for them, what kind of programs can they expand to, and how can all the great stuff that they're doing grow into the future. And then scenario 3, obviously the big distinction there is this community amenity. What if we add something programmatically there that is an advantage to the community? And then the last piece in all these is parking. And so really the way things shaped out is we see these potentials for parking. Again, they could potentially be switched around amongst the scenarios, but that's what we're looking at, roughly between 25 and 50 spaces throughout. So I will let my colleague Angelica walk you through the fun stuff here of how the clay started to get shaped on the sites.
Thank you, John. So yeah, our first scenario that we really looked into was, focusing just on, keeping NHS, a little bit of commercial. And when we talk about commercial and retail, within these scenarios, we're not expecting, like a large anchor store, but really smaller storefronts that could be used ideally by, local businesses. And have, small, like the advantage of having more retail in a more of a condensed space. So in this scenario, we have kind of the frontage of the building up against Chicago Avenue, giving the back of the lot the ability to have a larger parking space. And right now, NHS uses their parking lot a lot for, community market spaces. And I think that's something we really want to make sure we incorporate. How, even if this space is, sometimes dedicated towards parking, is there an ability that we can start to think about the vacant space as being something that can be transformed and become a community meeting space outdoors as well. So we have some variation and some stepping along Chicago Avenue. You want to go to the next slide? Just a quick perspective view so you can kind of see the relationship between the existing buildings along Chicago Avenue. So the one thing to note, we would be changing the alleyway. Right now, the alley actually goes through to Chicago, so we'd probably just kink it back to allow for a big presence of the building along Chicago Avenue. The second option expands commercial just a little bit, and it gives the opportunity for NHS to expand and really form an anchor at this location, bringing them up to closer to 13,000 square feet and allowing a potential parking or market space to kind of wrap around and kind of become adjacent to and kind of filter back through Central Park. The residential spaces kind of start stepping back, allowing balconies for all the residences. And then here's just a quick view of that. And obviously you can see with something like this kind of strategy, we're kind of stepping back a little bit to alleviate some of that mass that you saw in the first scenario. The third one obviously incorporates the community amenity space, which we've tucked back onto the site along Central Avenue, allowing a retail focus along Chicago. And with that, we would propose that, allowing, and this can happen in multiple strategies, but in this one, we're showing the opportunity to actually keep the existing building that's at the corner of Monticello in Chicago. A quick view. So, and then this is just a recap so you can kind of see how the different forms can start to relate or kind of create different kind of visuals along Chicago, whether it's kind of pushing back a little bit or pulling forward.
So, and then obviously those, color blocks show the programmatic elements and overall massing. But we want to dive into three I think the three main focuses of today's conversation, what we're really trying to get feedback on. So one is programmatically, we're looking to address community needs by targeting uses towards an environment that improves equity and creates opportunity. And so thinking through what those components are, what is that commercial retail space? What does it really mean? When you think about it in reality, what is it that we want to see on the site and that benefits the community? And then there is character and material. So even thinking about the existing facade of the building that's there, respecting the existing character of the corridor, but also, the idea that you can encourage a new architectural expression that bridges the past legacy with the future possibilities. And then the public realm, as Angelica was talking about, there is some multi-use open space here with this parking lot plaza. And so, what are the considerations for open space? How do we think about how the building is oriented to allow public gathering and a variety of uses outdoors? Certainly thinking about how the sun hits the site. We know it's obviously so cold in Chicago most of the time. So, direct sunlight's a big advantage. So keep these things in mind as we're going along, but we'll talk through each of these buckets one by one. So program is one we're showing as housing. So, just thinking of what is affordable housing, what can it be and what can it look like? From the idea of engaging artists to paint a mural in a lobby or on an exterior facade, for example, or literally, creating porosity or open doors and creating a literal connection to the community. What kind of things are important when we think about housing? And again, as like I mentioned, what goes in that commercial retail space? It's a big, vague term. Is there something centered around food or healthy food or cooking? Could there be a commercial kitchen that that local entrepreneurs come and use and grow their businesses, for example, like seen here with the hatchery. And what's a community amenity? Again, I mentioned a kitchen. So like, is that something people need? Is it fitness? Is it gathering space? What are the potential options for that everyone is thinking about or sees a need for? So the second bucket is character and material. So what we're looking at is a literal existing brick that is on the corridor that we photographed while we did our site visit a couple of weeks ago. And you can see a palette starts to emerge, different colors, blacks and grays and reds, but there is a sort of tonal continuity of it. So there's mostly brick, as you can see, brick masonry, concrete masonry, stone masonry. It's painted, it's glazed, all sorts of varieties, and all sorts of textures, which makes it really interesting. So how do we start to think about, is it brick as a material? Usually historically a brick building might have small punched openings, but like in this example, can we rethink, because of the structure, maybe it's different, that is much more transparent. Is that something that is important as we're thinking? And in what ways can the materials be used differently? Or similarly, something like this is a concrete building, but with simple formwork, it's created a texture and a tonality that's very similar to the stuff we've been looking at. I think also with this example, in terms of character, we think about massing and is this a 6-story building? Yes, but do you notice it because of the way it's broken down? The way there's these sort of inset balconies to create a porosity, and the way the ground plane is open. And so how do we start to think about that and implement those into this project so that we can create that variety and that visual interest across a large facade. And then there's the idea of how new can meet old. And so here's a local example with Shuba's and the Tide House, the old Schlitz Brewery building has this fascinating pattern with different colored brick, and then that pattern was taken and used in a completely different way. And with a completely different aesthetic, but you can just see the respect that is paid to the existing building here. And then in contrast, literally in contrast, you know, how is there a way to think about something new that is different, and how could it blend while also respecting what's existing, and not just the existing buildings on the site, but the existing buildings in the neighborhood. But you know, in this case, the brick sort of creates a monolithic feel to it. So the mass above has a monolithic black color, and then the brick is certainly textured. And so that, you know, new but different material also has a new but different texture. And you can see it stepping back from the facade. It's not in line with it. It's not, you know, trying to match it, but it knows it's something different, and it's accepting that. And you know, how are we going to think about what that is? And then the third bucket is the public realm. So I think this one is very, very important for us to think about. You know, we know parking is a critical thing, especially for the work neighborhood housing services does. And so, you know, and residential, of course, you know, we need some parking on the site. So in this example, you can see what is basically not much more than a parking lot using paint and what I'll call architectural furniture creates something that is totally different and usable in multiple different ways. And so I think this is really where we're starting to think about those events, those farmers markets, those gatherings that people could have, and how you can program this, because cars don't necessarily park in the lot every day, all day. And so how do we think about parking, especially surface parking, in a different way? This one's a much larger scale, you know, sort of example of that. But again, it's sort of simple ideas of architectural furniture or things that people can engage with. You can see these girls on a swing here, you know, and then it's simple paint essentially on the ground, nothing more than the stripes you'd see on any road. And so how can that engage beyond just the site into the community? Again, a local example here at Southport and Lincoln. This was you know, a design by site local landscape designers, and it's really about public safety. It's simply, you know, these markers guarding this crosswalk, and we know Chicago Avenue certainly has you know, people speeding at times, and then we also know that there is plenty of students walking constantly to the schools. And so what does that mean? How can that play a role? And then you can see, you know, there's some cafe tables here, something simple, but like, if we're already doing something about public safety, can it become a real pedestrian amenity? And then similarly, you know, again, this is a train station that we've probably all know, but looking at these pieces of urban infrastructure like a parking lot, and what a simple mural can do, you know, with some permanent installations that people can engage the site in a way that they would never have before. And that is it for the design recap where we're standing today.
All right, thanks so much, John and Angelica. Really appreciate that recap. So we are getting ready to head into our breakout rooms for further discussion. I will throw back up on the screen a little bit about our breakout rooms. Here we are. So our breakout rooms tonight are going to be for about 35 minutes, so we can really dive into the discussion, really hearing what the feedback is from the community, from all of you. And with the remainder balance of time, we'll come out and kind of do a summary. But before we go in, just a few rules of the road for the breakout room. The breakout rooms are going to be facilitated by DPD personnel as well as parts of the JGMA team. Also within the room will be interspersed some more of our CCAC pro bono team in various capacities in each breakout room. Please allow one person at a time to speak. Our hope is that everyone will get heard. Please be courteous and respectful to everyone's ideas and comments. Equally, consider using the chat function to share your ideas if you haven't had your idea heard. We will do our best to capture and try to respond to every comment we receive, not only verbally, but also in the chat. So ideally, we'd like to focus the discussion on the questions that will show on the screen shortly, and our groups will reconvene and we'll have that time to kind of express the general takeaways. So we have a lot of questions on the screen here, but basically it kind of falls into three main things where we're really interested in hearing feedback about. What you all think about the program mix that's within these proposals, the character and materials you'd like to see out of a design that's going forward, and lastly, that public realm open space component. How would you like that seen and crafted? So we'll delve deeper into each of these 9 questions in the breakout rooms. And so shortly you will see on your screen something that looks like this, and it will be your opportunity to join the breakout room and continue the conversation. So without further ado, here we go.
And I'll just mention too that some of you will not see that. That means you'll stay in the main room. So if you see it, please say join. If you don't see it, don't worry, you're in the right place. So thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the main room breakout. I'll show on the screen our questions here. We'd like to hear responses back from. Without further ado, I just wanted to open it up and say hi to you all and let you all take it away, whatever you'd like to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We actually, before we start, would folks mind doing like just a really quick intro so we all know who's in the room?
Hello, my name is Mercedes Pickett. I'm the founder and CEO of Earth's Remedies. We are connecting the community to the multi-million-dollar investments in Chicago, and we're doing a survey asking them for their input, connecting them directly to the work of Invest Southwest as well as POA. So we appreciate you guys taking your time out.
Yes, and I am Charles Pickett. I'm the vice president of ER. I'm the brother of Mercedes Pickett. I just spoke. We are really excited to learn more about Invest Southwest. We were a part of the North Lawndale and also the Austin RFPs, and we both grew up in Humboldt Park, Garfield Park area. So seeing the potential developments, that could happen within Humboldt Park, especially the blocks that we grew just down the actual street from, is really nice. So thank you for taking the time. We know it's just put a lot to put together, so we appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Katisha Melendez, and my husband Louis Melendez is right here with me. We are residents right here on the Chicago Avenue corridor. So we just want to hear what's coming to the community, and let's have an input, because we're on the fence of, do we stay or do we move out?
Awesome, thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, I'm Pastor Kathy Palmer. I'm from Rivers of Living Water Ministries International, and we have a nonprofit group called the Shamar Group. And we're actually in Lawndale, and we are looking to find some space in Humboldt Park or the West East Garfield area, just so we'll have a space for the Shamar Group. And in the Shamar Group, we minister and work with youth. We work with youth who may have some challenges due to the violence and killing. We have psychiatrists and assistants on our team to talk to the youth. And we've adopted a school called Jensen Elementary, and we perform those programs within Jensen Elementary School, which is at Harrison and Sacramento. And we also give away food and things like that. But it's also a part of our church, but it has its own standalone nonprofit. And so we're familiar with the Chicago area and Humboldt Park. I just sold some property that was on Chicago Avenue. So I'm just curious to see the things that'll be going forward in that area.
Okay, I'm Juanita Pye. I'm the new operations director for the Kelly Hall YMCA. I'm Chicago and Hamlin, and I'm also the operations director for the YMCA's Youth Safety and Violence Prevention Program that operates at that location, North Lawndale, Woodlawn, Pilsen, Little Village, and South Chicago.
That's great. Welcome.
Ravi Ricker, Rap Architecture, working on some other Invest Southwest sites, interested in the Chicago Avenue corridor in general, and so I've been participating.
Thanks for joining us.
Julio Paz, Chicago Commons. We operate 2 early ed centers in the Humboldt Park community. One that's kitty corner from the site in discussion, and we've been in the neighborhood for a little bit more than 30 years.
Welcome.
My name is Jacob Cleary. I'm the branch manager at the Chicago Public Library, Richard M. Bailey branch, which is at the eastern end of the corridor at Chicago and Kedzie.
Welcome, Jacob. And anyone else? And it's okay if you want to hold till later, and we could dive back into the questions. John, I don't know if on your side you want to throw up on the screen the questions and control the deck.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, so well, our 3 categories here, we have these 9 questions up on the screen, which cover program, character materials, public realm, and open space. Given these 9 questions, I'm curious if anyone has any feedback with regards to these, or just any general comments on what they've seen thus far.
And I'm happy to go back to any slide too, if you want to reference any of the massings or anything like that.
I can start. So with the program, I like number 1. I think food, like health and wellness, is very important. And I think what lacks within Humboldt Park is exactly that in regards to the healthy food options. You would have to go to Aldi's, which is really much on the outskirts, or you have to travel over to Walmart, which is pretty much in Austin. I do a lot of my grocery shopping at Pete's Market, which is located on Western. So you have to go outside of the community. And there's also, besides the YMCA, which is right on, I believe that's Hamlin, I'm not entirely sure, it's not a lot of gyms. So I think those are 2 things that could be improved, especially with how major Chicago Avenue is.
Thanks, Charles. Any other comments? I'm curious as we wait to hear. Go ahead.
But I just want to say, I want to echo what he said, like the fresh food option. I really would like to see more of that. I also would like to see, we want to see merchandising because you have the Kedzie Mall, but that's if you're urban. If you don't like urban stuff, we would like to see more variety of merchandising up and down. Like, can we get a flower shop? Can we get a bakery? Can we get more services, not just traditional stuff that they have in low income areas? So I think if we expand that then we can attract more people to this area because we are on Chicago Avenue, which is close to everything.
And also, I love the ideas that were just shared. A community hub. I do know when these facilities are built very similar to the hatchery, it's very hard to get inside the building. So they exist, they look beautiful. However, the residents may not have that access. So having small hubs where commercial space can be rented for pop-up events, allowing the community to walk past and see interactive and engaging window views. One thing that we do need is health and wellness services. When it comes to food, the West Side is showing a food desert. As you all know, there are an Aldi's and a Fresh Market at Chicago and Kedzie. However, the next Aldi is at North Avenue and I believe Cicero. So connecting the community to fresh food markets, cafes where the youth can see themselves sitting, allowing it to be very Instagrammable, allowing the small mom and dad shops to be a part of this infrastructure. It will allow the residents to have retention in that area. So directly connecting to the residents, understanding that major businesses will bring clients, but having small retail mom and dad shops will develop that relationship we need to develop without displacement.
That's great. Thank you, Mercedes.
I'd like to also add to that. I'm Kathy Palmer. I'd also like to add to that in reference to the banks and the services that the banks provide. There's not a lot of banks in that area. There was a U.S. bank at Pulaski and Lake. There was also one, but that's in Austin. As far as in that community in that area, there aren't any banks. There are more currency exchanges. So we'd like to see more banks in that area providing services to those people in those areas.
Thanks, ma'am. Well, Julio, I think you had a thought.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have employees and families, and I think, thank you, Gerardo. Some type of family dining and lunch places that aren't necessarily, fast food may be options, and going back to the healthy food options or options just to be able to have families recreate, even if it's just a pizza place of some kind.
Thanks, Rose. I see a hand from Ravi.
Yes, I was wondering if the live work designation or someone could speak to the possibility of the live work use being used to help mom and pop and or sort of younger artist crafts businesses spring up. I know there was someone commenting earlier on about sort of mom and pop businesses, and I wonder if that couldn't be leveraged to provide that opportunity, given that you're looking at a mixed use building with retail and residents.
It's an interesting thought. It's one I can certainly say we haven't really considered, but it's certainly interesting and something we can kind of take back as we work towards the RFP release. And we do have some kind of models for that in other parts of the city, particularly on ground floor where retail is kind of hard to fill. The idea that maybe you could have some live work, small business owners type units, whether they're artists or otherwise, has seemed to work well in the past. So it's something we can take back and see how we might put into the unit mix.
I think one thing that would really help is pretty much connecting with the different schools within the area, connecting with the youth with particular projects like the different internships, potentially bringing jobs within this Black and Brown community is very important. I think that would help that community thrive. But connecting with the youth, I think one of the stats was the medium age is 31. I mean, it's a very, very young community. So if we engage that within the neighborhood, that's how we're going to foster it and help it grow. So I'm just curious. I didn't really see much in regards to the youth in this. I know that's probably going to be focused on the RFPs. And what they decide to do with that. So we were on the North Lawndale RFP meetings, like the Austin one, and that's going to engage with the youth. So as long as that's a factor and that's a push for this, I'm definitely curious how that's going to maybe like work with YMCA in regards to like health, connecting with or Academy. I'm not sure if it's called or I think it's KIP, or Roe Clark in regards to connecting kids with the arts that's going to go inside the different buildings. A lot of students are artistic and we definitely want to promote that within our community.
Yes, and Charles, in regards to the medium age, that is due to the mortality rate in the low income community when they do not have access to the healthcare. So the medium age is 35, but the life expectancy is that short, where it affects the medium age. So having those wellness programs are key. And I definitely agree, Charles, connecting with the high schools, not just to incorporate the art, but finding a way to integrate internships for the community youth to be a part of the workforce.
Right. And then one more thing to add to that, Mercedes, the mental health. I think that's very, very important. When you're within these at-risk communities, Humboldt Park, Garfield Park, I definitely think that we can potentially highlight. And if this retail space, this commercial space is going to engage with the community, we can promote the different programs that are going on. I think someone just commented that there's a mental health program at the YMCA. I'm sorry, I did not know about that, but I think most of the community might not know about that. So if we use this push to continue to further that knowledge, I think this is definitely something that we can do.
Well, I want to make sure, thank you for those comments. I want to make sure some of these hands that have been raised get acknowledged. Jacob, your hand has been up the longest, so please share your thoughts.
Sure. So just related to the retail and commercial program, most lacking, I think that perhaps like a pharmacy or a office supply store for, the supporting businesses, just because that's some of the questions I get a lot at the library is people looking for envelopes or stamps or folders that they want to buy. The library doesn't sell them, but and then also like where can people go to fill prescriptions?
Thanks for that feedback. Kathy, go ahead.
Yes, our program under the Shamar Group does deal with mental health and wellness, and we also work with youth, in elementary through high school, and it doesn't have to be targeted just to the area where we are located. We're willing to bring that into the other schools and other community areas. We also, as part of that program, do what's like music, the arts, and teach them how to play the piano and different instruments as part of that summer music program that with the right funds can be extended, for longer than just summer. But that's a program that we offer also under the Shamar Group. And we found that it does work with the youth, especially in the low to income, moderate families, and those families who have been dealing with challenges in their family, you know, with death and in the community, and also the conditions in their homes. And so, yes, we'd be willing to do that. And I think that would be helpful if we could kind of spread it out, you know, throughout our community.
That's great. And Kathy, I'm just curious, your program, does it, that you talked about with the Sharma group, is there an exact location that you all operate out of, or do you just visit schools?
No, actually we're building a facility at 3249 was Harrison. Right now we operating out the school due to the pandemic stopping us from completing that building. And so we're looking for a standalone facility in Humboldt Park or along, you know, or Austin or West Garfield. So right now we can visit the schools, but we have a place in the school where we operate out of, but we can pull it out to different locations.
Thanks for that insight. And I see another hand up. Katisha?
Yeah, I have a question. I like the idea about engaging youth. So I'm from the community, and I think about, we don't have that many children on my block, but the 3 that we have, none of our kids go to neighborhood schools. So I like the idea of engaging youth, but if we only focus on the schools, what about the other kids who live in the community that may not go to a neighboring school? So what have we thought about doing so that my daughter can access some of these programs in the community?
Yeah, from my understanding, and I would hope this is the case, the space is for the community. I guess the idea was just to directly pull the majority of the youth that are in the neighboring schools. One thing the community is asking is about potential displacement. So at the moment, the development is with the current residents in mind, but will that always be the case? Will the current residents be putting up the groundwork, the artwork for what's to come?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid concern, particularly in any community where that kind of hasn't seen a lot of investment for a long time. And really the approach that the department and the city, the administration is trying to take with this investment is to provide resources for the community and provide housing that is affordable to the community and accessible for residents. And so the idea with the housing component of this development is that it would do that. And so you're talking about 50 units that would remain accessible at affordable rates that, you know, are pretty, would be relatively close to what people pay now in rent for a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment for quite some time, as well as new construction with like dedicated property maintenance. So really, our thought is that this could go a long way in terms of improving quality of life for folks in the community and providing them, you know, decent housing options, or another decent housing option, I should say. And, you know, I don't think that really the goal of Invest Southwest, to kind of go back to the recap that Ernest gave at the beginning, is to continue to come back and make these investments over time for folks that are there now, and from an equity lens, so that folks that are there now can take advantage of them and can benefit from them. So while this will be hopefully a large catalytic project, you know, we're working on a round 2 or you know, if you will, kind of strategy for Invest Southwest, and that we want to kind of define with community based on needs and priorities. So this is just kind of the first step in that.
Right. I really like that. And one of the things that I was seeing is I know it was showing the Black and the Hispanic uh, uh, population, I'm sorry, and then it was the white population that was closer to the Kezi area. And I know from Central Park to Kezi, there was going to be some improvements in regards to these RFPs. But then going off with what Mercedes was saying is that could also bring fear within the community. We know a lot of people like within Garfield Park, Humboldt Park are moving outside of the community because of the increase in regards to rent and the increase in regards to the housing like costs and like what it takes to live within these neighborhoods. And if the sudden million dollars, I'm sorry, investments are coming within the community, I'm just curious. I've been hearing a lot of the improvements within the community, but I haven't heard anything in regards to rent freezes or caps or anything in regards to that. And I'm not sure who would be the best person to speak with, but with the sudden investments over the next couple of years, how is that going to keep us within our neighborhoods instead of pushing us out because we can't afford it in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, you know, the rent caps and rent freezes are challenging because it's really kind of state statute, you know, level work that needs to be done. But again, the kind of the role that the city sees with projects like this is that this will provide affordable housing options. And what we want to do, you know, the key to Invest Southwest is leveraging public investment or making public investment to leverage private investment. And that what that means is, you know, finding creative ways, not just through these large RFPs and these kind of tax credit type projects, but you know, how do we help the small property owner rehab their, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 unit building on the corridor in exchange for affordability, you know, for a certain period of time. And that's really the best way that the city can kind of leverage its tools to help keep the community affordable for folks. And so that's kind of what we're talking about now in terms of, you know, this is a large catalytic project, but what's the next phase, right? Because on its own, while this could spur other investment, you know, we want to make sure that that investment comes with, again, those kind of long-term benefits for a community. Ernest, I see some hands up, and I think this is a great kind of flow of conversation, but I want to make sure that we also get to kind of the other 2 columns, but I also want to make sure people are heard. So maybe we can take the couple hands that are up and then make some time for talking about public realm and kind of the character of what we might see here.
Yeah, that sounds great, Gerardo. So Kathy, your hand was the hand that's been up the longest. So please go ahead.
In reference to the housing, I got on late, and this is my first time being on. My question is, are these slides and the ones from the first session, are they available?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That's that. Well, in one side, that'll help me with what I needed to ask. So I can pass now.
Okay. And Maurice?
Yes, I'm here. I heard a comment about the rental agreements in the Garfield Park area. One person that I would highly recommend to speak to is Siri Hibbler, the president of the Garfield Park Chamber of Commerce. She is really quite profound in that area. She was actually one of the main ones when they first mentioned about the rent hikes in these areas. She was one of the first people to come to basically combat that against the aldermen, because the alderman Burnett specifically, I know, is all for it. I think it was his idea who actually spearheaded that. I may be wrong with that, but that's what I think. So I recommend the Garfield Park Chamber of Commerce, Siri Hibbler, be the one that gets the call for a more detailed explanation about that, because that's something that she is vehement against. So yeah, that's why I recommend to speak to get a more detailed answer as far as how we can combat that.
Thanks, Maurice. And last hand up is Julio.
Thank you. In terms of the housing, Chicago Commons serves families that have incomes about, $15,000 a year. And when we think about housing options, we just want to make sure that we're being inclusive of families, at or below 30% and 60% the AMI. So that way those families can have that opportunity. There's also the Salvation Army, not too far from us, where folks, struggle for opportunities for safe, decent, affordable housing is what Gerardo's saying. So as we think about housing, it's not only affordability, but also the ability to provide opportunities for our families to live with dignity.
Thanks, Julio.
All right, so we're going forward, and thank you everyone for those comments. We are curious now if we can kind of pivot more towards what did you all think of the examples of the character and materials or the public realm, open space, some of the questions we have here on the screen. For example, what public realm activities or programming should be accounted for and designed in the public realm of what's being envisioned as this parking lot / hybrid public space?
Maybe it might help to flip back through some of those images that show the scenario so folks can kind of have stuff to react to.
Yeah, I would say I really like the styles of the buildings, like that the bricks matches and those designs. I'm pretty sure everyone might feel the same when those cookie cutter style buildings that pop up out of nowhere. I think there's one right across the street from the Salvation Army building on Chicago, like 2 blocks away from that. It's like they just placed it there and it looks ugly. We want something that honors the community and that looks like it matches that as well. So this building right here, I would like that. Like I would love to live in there.
Cool.
Can you go back a slide? We kind of like keeping some of the existing structure and just adding on, because as you all said with the demographics, a lot of the buildings are older. They were built before 1940. However, we have a lot of great stone over here because we have a gray stone. Then the lady next to me has a red brick, and those are great buildings. We've just had to gut the inside. So I think if we keep some of that existing, the buildings, and just add on, I think it'll look more uniform.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I think, another question I'm curious to hear about from everyone is kind of in this idea that continuing on from what Katisha said, how can a new building relate visually to the existing character of the corridor or these adjacent buildings? If we can talk a little bit more about that.
Maybe the massings might help.
John, if you could roll to the massings. Oh yeah, there you go.
But can you repeat the question again, Ernest?
So the question dealt with the relationship of how the new building can relate visually to the existing character of the corridor, in particular the adjacent buildings along Chicago Avenue, but we could expand that as well to talk about kind of off the main drag of Chicago Avenue to kind of what's happening behind the building as well. And any ideas or thoughts with regards to how these massings are relating to those, but also the character.
Can I ask if you can go back to the slide where you're showing the 3 different massings together? Yep, there you are. So I noticed 2 of these options sort of address the keep the building facade at the street front, which for a major artery like Chicago Avenue seems appropriate. The center option scenario too, I like that it potentially provides more of a public space, but I don't know if we're considering that parking, if parking sort of on Chicago Avenue isn't kind of unfortunate, because you create this kind of gapped tooth kind of result along the main street. I don't know. Though I do like the idea of incorporating kind of more of a community outdoor space. I don't know if that's achievable in another way without interrupting the facades along Chicago.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think what we were trying to do in this case is think about that public space that NHS does have and the programs that occur on it, like a farmer's market or whatever kind of things that they're doing. How can those be expanded, and then how could that public space reach the avenue? You know, I think one thing that's not shown here is an option where it perhaps comes like in between the building, but not at a corner. Is something we could explore too. But it's a valid point.
It's interesting you said that, because I was just thinking you could pull the residential and the commercial apart and almost have two buildings with a courtyard in the middle that becomes that. I think that it is really, I realize NHS does that market, and it does seem like a really important asset for the community to maintain. And I would hate to lose the programming that already exists there. The question really is, how can we make that enhance that programming? So I'm glad to hear you thought about that.
I think I see Derek with his hand up.
Derek's.
Yeah, go ahead, Ernest.
Okay, it looks like maybe Derek's having some connectivity issues of trying to unmute himself.
Yeah, I think one question that I'd like to hear from folks on is, what does Chicago Avenue need in terms of the street itself, right? And some of the examples I believe were like street trees, furniture, and how can we use potentially this development to start to kind of identify that. So I'm curious to hear, what folks think of certainly at least this portion of Chicago Avenue.
So my husband jumped in. He said that park, he likes what you said, Gerardo, about having the park, this like trees up and down Chicago Avenue, some benches. But he also said that park that's right there in Chicago and Kedzie, it needs a facelift because it needs to be more appealing.
More manicured.
Yeah, more manicured.
Yeah, you mean the big field.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But it would be good to see some mixed media up and down, like how you have the glass and the masonry on the outside of the buildings, or maybe a statue here or there. It would be nice to see that, because I think it would change the mindset.
Okay. Looks like we have a minute left. Any other thoughts?
Yes, also there's so much developments happening on the west side of Chicago. If Invest Southwest can somehow work with the colors, so if we're biking and we're in Humboldt Park or Garfield Park or Austin, we're basically viewing the developments that have occurred in our hood. So we're biking down Chicago Avenue and we're seeing, oh my God, Humboldt Park going down to Austin, and we can see the unity. The work is happening, and it could potentially displace us. But before that, I think we would love to see that unity, bridging the West Side together. Even with the colors on these streets prior, allowing the students to cross, this seating for cafes, etc.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so a unifying theme to the street.
Yes, yes. It would make it feel home to the youth.
And that's a good point. I was also thinking about with some of this commercial space, someplace with hotspots, because a lot of our kids are struggling because they don't have internet at home. So if we have some places that could be for artistic development, think tanks where they could go and do their homework with their laptops or have access to technology. I think that would be another great idea.
Yeah, under scenario 3, there were little hubs under the building, and those can be think tanks all year round. I would love if part B, if we had some open ground on, for scenario 2, open ground on Chicago Avenue, but for scenario 3, those little hubs underneath the building can serve as those think tanks, Wi-Fi enabled spaces for the youth.
Okay.
Yeah, and to complement that, I don't know why they took away the basketball courts. You know, our youth doesn't have any place that they can go exercise. It seems as if they took away the basketball court. I use Orr, for example. Orr was a place when I was younger that you'd be able to go to a basketball court. It's wonderful that they added the track, but unfortunately, not every child is running track. But kids need somewhere to exercise that energy off. You know, so it does, I think that'll help in kind of diminishing all the violence that's going on these days. You know, definitely the kids not doing all the violence, but there are kids that are out here doing violence, like such as carjacking. You know, they need somewhere to utilize their talents. They don't have anywhere to go. So if those think tanks can have some property put aside for that as well, I think that'll help, because you can actually make the community as beautiful as the most beautiful flower as you could think of. But if you don't have anything for the people to do to make them more beautiful, or to do something that's not destructive, I think it'll just be more so in vain. But yeah, kids definitely need to have somewhere to go, something to do. They don't have anything to go. They don't have anywhere to go or anything to do as far as for sports or recreation. So we need some of that property put aside for that as well.
Are you talking about outdoor basketball courts or indoor?
I think that comment was outdoor, Keith.
Okay.
So I thank you all for the spirited conversations. I know in this it would be great if we could keep going on for more and more, but we're coming up on time, and I wanted to make sure we heard some of the overall comments that were discussed in our various breakout rooms. So welcome back to everyone, and thank you so much for all of your comments and related to the proposal. So kind of going forward, some final thoughts. I think some overall, our team members have captured kind of the conversations that have happened in our various breakout rooms, and we'll get together post meeting and decipher all of the great nuggets that you've shared. But I'm curious from the entire group, from the 3 questions you see up here, hearing some feedback on what site opportunities generated the most positive feedback and their challenges. What surprised you the most out of what you saw and what you've heard? And what are your main takeaways about the scenarios that were presented?
Well, I can respond to that. This is Derek.
Hi, Derek.
How are you? First of all, I love the fact of the architectural detail matching existing as well as new, because it does work. You know, you haven't seen it until you saw it, you know? So I'm open for that and see that look, because I am in construction, like I was mentioning, for the last 35 years. I'm a superintendent for a construction company, and we're currently building UIH Hospital on Hermitage and Taylor. So I'm looking for the change for my community. I've been over here for over 50 years. I grew up in this area. I went to the grammar school, Brian Piccolo. So I'm looking for change. And what surprised you the most? Just the fact that it's happening. I'm excited that it's happening. This is a long time coming. And we are part of what's going to happen on Chicago Avenue. I'm a stakeholder. I have property on Chicago Avenue. I have business on Chicago Avenue. And I'm just looking for all of these great ideas to come into fruition so I can see it before I die. So it's just good to know this it's happening. I don't hold up any much time.
Thank you, Derek. Anyone else?
I agree. I appreciate how the community have a seat at the table, and I really hope that we can continue the discussion after hours. We don't need this platform to come and think about ideas to bring when we do meet in another setting. So I hope we can continue to connect offline and develop while Invest Southwest is doing the same within our community.
Thanks, Mercedes.
Ernest, would you like, should we give a quick recap of our breakout session? Would that be good, or do you want to just open it up to the full group now?
Just open it up to the full group considering the time we have remaining. So any other final thoughts based off of the what you've heard?
Ernest, I do hope that there is more detailed coordination with NHS because making sure that it's very clear about what kind of inclusiveness they need to have in the project and how that fits both programmatically and in the pro forma. Because I think there may be some open questions, and I think that the more that those questions are answered and clear and concise so that people can underwrite those and diligence those correctly, I think that's better for folks that need to kind of take, look at the opportunity.
Hey guys, this is Maurice, Children's Place. Kind of dovetailing off what AJ just shared. Just great conversation being involved in this portion of the thought, but I cannot help but think about once this comes to fruition, once it's built, once it's active, the responsibility to make sure it's functioning at a high level, where will that fall? And to ensure that this same group of people will have conversation in that process as well after the more brick and mortar is up. That's going to be the most effective piece. So hopefully you can share that with the city or whomever else, once this is done, what's going to be the go forward plan to make sure it's functioning at a high level.
And you know what, Ernest, even though that you all are looking at that one spot, we want to ensure that the development continues across the entire corridor. Because I know it's 4 other spots, but we want to ensure that once you do that we can continue to build up so that we will have a true continuity and a true community of resources up and down to Pulaski, because we can walk from there, walk from most of our houses in the neighborhood up and down to Pulaski.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Ms. Melendez. And I just feel like I need to chime in a little bit because a similar process on Chicago Avenue in Austin, we actually looked at 10 sites there and then narrowed it down to 3 and then RFP'd 1. And what we know is that because we looked at those other sites and we did similar exercises to what we're doing here, we know that in and of itself is generating development interest on those other sites. So when we talk about a catalytic project, that's what we mean, that, this investment can hopefully catalyze other investments up and down the corridor in West Humboldt Park as well. So totally with you on that.
And that's what we're trying to do on the Chicago Avenue corridor with some shovel-ready projects. But I want everyone to keep in mind, this is a community involvement, because the community, they have a lot of stake also. This needs to be a development where the community can not only visit one site, but there's something for them also, whether it's the youth or the seniors. We're trying to make this a corridor where you can actually find whatever you need without leaving out of the community. And if we don't think about this wisely, we're going to lose some people along the way. I do know we want to keep the community component, wellness component in there somewhere. And I think I did talk about this once. Site 3 is a beautiful site. It's in the middle of the corridor, but it's the smallest site. And it would be nice if we could have 2 sites, 2 small sites. I think I said this to Mr. Garcia.
Yeah, no, I mean, look,
Because it's a small site, honestly, and we're trying to put so much in it that we're losing our community piece.
well, perhaps, but I hear what you're saying about the multiple sites, and I think it's something that we have to go back, and now that we've gotten some really good feedback here, is do the analysis around what's financially feasible, what's going to pencil out. So to AJ's point earlier, and he knows this because I think he's been involved in at least one other RFP response, but we really want to be clear in what we put in the RFP in terms of what we expect as a program, and to tie with that what's financially feasible. So we'll take back what we have here. We'll kind of go back and crunch numbers and figure out what's doable. And I think this is the first round of kind of investment as part of Invest Southwest. There's more to come. And so if we can't get to a certain part or a priority, not every site can be everything, right? And so we understand that, but it's also critically important for us to kind of set that vision through this exercise with everyone on the line here, so that we're ready for the next site and the site after that and the site after that.
I did notice that, if I'm not mistaken, that Site 3 did have the most parking spaces. I think it was 2 and 3 or whatever it was, but I think it had 50 parking spaces. That was the most of the 3 options that were shown, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the third option did have the most parking.
But those weren't above ground, were they?
There's a possibility to obtain upwards to 50. I believe the design team has some creative ways of getting towards that. There are some available vacant spaces, vacant land nearby, but there's upwards of 50 is a possibility. I want to be, I hate to kind of cut this conversation short, but we're a little over time. The great collective team that we've had from our pro bono group with JGMA, Belgravia, Integra, and McCune, we will collect all of the feedback that has been mentioned in the various breakout rooms and digest all those great nuggets of information that was shared. Before we close out formally, I wanted to kind of show kind of the next steps with the timeline of things. We're kind of here at the tail end of developing and releasing the RFP with the April visioning workshop. Next steps ahead is kind of giving an announcement at the April roundtable. But the RFP will be produced and out, available to the public from April 21st on. We'll go through a period of additional engagement opportunities, and then an evaluation in the summer of what proposals come back into us with various presentations of the proposals. And then from there, the selected developer will continue negotiating, working with NHS and working with whatever other partners they may bring to the table in their proposal to bring the RFP to fruition. So from there, lastly, that's pretty much it for this evening. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email dpd@cityofchicago.org. And we will respond accordingly. And I look forward to seeing those who have been at our monthly roundtables again at the monthly roundtable. I look forward to connecting and interacting with you all further as this process continues. And thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the great feedback.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Peace.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.